how should I start? Céline Sciamma, welcome to Oslo.
Thank you.
It's a really great opportunity for us to sit down with you. You are a filmmaker that a lot of us in our magazine have been following since your first film, Water Lilies. I'll be using the English titles. It's always fun for us to try with the French, but only with Tomboy, I guess. But we saw that film while the magazine was about to be started. And I think I saw it in Gothenburg Film Festival. And it was among those kinds of inspiring films that, you know, it's from a first-time filmmaker and you see that that kind of story is possible to make, but the poetry and the insight sort of in a very complicated theme, but the film is very open. It struck me. And then it struck me again with Tomboy and with Girlhood, and now again with Portrait of a Lady of Fire. So just like a general opening question, how important has it been for you to kind of find that cinematic language that can keep all these films as open as possible? Because I feel like you're doing it on purpose, obviously, to draw us into maybe a difficult theme or characters we don't know, like the Girlhood gang. I would never approach them and talk to them, but through your film I can really... So this is something I've been thinking about.
Well, I guess in the beginning it was much more intuitive than today. But there's definitely a thread here and friendship within the film. I guess now, if you would have asked me in 2007, I guess I wouldn't have been able to answer that question. But today, I think I can, at least I can give you an answer from 2019. It's not because you are representing characters or scenes or ideas that haven't been represented much that it's all about that. It's still about inventing a new language. Like, it's not enough being just about, okay, so like for instance, Water Lilies is the rise of desire, of a lesbian desire, for a young girl. Like, this could be enough in a way, you know. Yep. But it's about how cinema is about still inventing. It's not because it's a new image that it's going to be new. It's because it's your language, it's your interpretation of the image that will make it new. I must say, like for instance, in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, there is an abortion scene. There is very few abortion scenes in cinema. So one might think, okay, I'm gonna try to portray an abortion scene, but it's not enough. I like, for instance, that scene, I didn't felt it was complete, and I think, and I talk about the process of writing, until I had an idea, a visual and also narrative idea that would make it belong to that film. So each film has its own grammar. And now that there is a kind of a body of work, because we have 4 films to discuss.
We've been waiting. 3 is almost, but when's the 4th coming? And now it's here.
We can see a pattern of inventing an image. You know, like sometimes I'm not going to say enemies, but
critics.
No, but one might say, okay, if cinema is political, then, you know, like cinema would be an alibi for politics. Or when we talk about new representation, like filling in the blanks would just mean putting a character that hasn't been seen or telling a story that hasn't been told. That it would be just about that, but it's always about inventing a new language. It's not because an image is missing that you're just filling the blank with the actual image. That's why cinema is so political. It's because you still have to invent the language for that new image. The image doesn't exist and that means you have to invent it. It doesn't mean that you just have to do it. I don't. Yeah, it's a sort of difference.
I can understand it easier as an editor than a journalist, because sometimes I talk with other editors, and we are sort of amazed that we have a job that is essentially to walk into new territory each time, even though the type of an image can be like the blank canvas in your recent film. Before the first stroke of painting, it's still blank. It can be anything. And it's the same like when you walk into a new project. Well, you're the writer and director, so you will know where the images come from. But for the editor, it can be very blank. Like you walk in the first day, you open it, and it's there.
Yeah.
It's a new image. But it's also reinterpretations of not an old image, but something that has been portrayed, but by someone else.
Yeah.
Never as original as that.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that with all cinema I watch as a cinema goer. But I feel it with the films that can, not necessarily all the ones I like the most, but the ones that challenge something within me. And I think it's really, really interesting about your body of work that it finds a way to challenge me each time, yet I can recognize your voice at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I guess it's not a question, but it feels like you are searching still, like not being comfortable with the way you are making your films. And that, to me, with Portrait of a Lady of Fire, which sort of like your first grown-up film, or I don't know how you describe it, but it's so interesting to me how it seems like it could also be your first film, in a way, because it seems like your camera is constantly not totally sure it's supposed to be there, but the intuition is that it's there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that yourself, or do you feel is it harder to sort of invent?
No, I feel like that also because there's challenge in every film, of course, but challenge that we are aware of. Of course, making films is challenging.
Practical challenge.
Of course, but like, for instance, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I knew it would be a meditation, also a reflection about shot, reverse shot, which is something that I hadn't done much before. A very few shot, reverse shot in my films. And this time, when I decided to go with the love dialogue, and also a creation dialogue within a love dialogue, I knew that it would be about shot, reverse shot, because it's about somebody posing for somebody else. And I was like, okay, so now is the time for me to think about shot, reverse shot. And there was already the beginning of a reflection about shot, reverse shot in Girlhood, in two scenes. One scene is a love dialogue between Mariam, the character, and her love interest. It was shot, reverse shot, and it's because it was a love dialogue, a seduction scene, and the other big one is the Rihanna scene, which is actually kind of a sketch for Portrait of a Lady on Fire, because the character is gazing at her friends dancing, and she enters her own gaze. And Portrait of a Lady on Fire is a lot about, the gaze is basically the plot of the film.
Yeah, I know.
And it's all about so it's a film that has a lot to do with editing also, because shot, reverse shots, the rhythm you will find in the editing room. And it's about characters being very still. I mean, I went there was a lot of pressure on shot, reverse shot on that film, because you have to pose. So, for instance, Adele Haenel's character, she is still. And the painter character, Marianne, she's moving, but very, very, she's taking just one step closer or further from the canvas. So this is a lot of content, and the challenge is, how do you create a progression within this shot, reverse shot, throughout all the film. Kind of also in a very, I don't know the word in meta, when you...
I can... you're kind of discussing it within your choices.
Exactly. and to be playful with this idea and harvesting this idea. Basically, I think, and it's really obvious in Portrait, but it was already the case in Water Lilies, and it's two films that are really in dialogue, I think.
I was thinking a lot about Water Lilies.
Yes.
And it's the one I've seen furthest back in time, so I felt really that I'm going to have like a little Sciamma festival around Christmas.
And also because there is Adele in both of them, obviously, but also because it's the two films where there is a very strong global philosophy with local solutions. And I think, that's how I try to think about cinema in my films. It's very strong global philosophy, like this reverse shot meditation, for instance, with very, very precise local solution. And it's the discussion within these two layers that actually invent the language of the film.
And I also think, building on that, your films have this wonderful balance of, what can we say, like, who occupies the images? Like, you're never crowding it. It would be so easy. It would be so easy to end up with 5 more kids there, and 3 more there, or when the chorus here around the fire could have been more in a way, because that's what we're used to. But there's a strange discipline that I don't know if it's conscious, but I think about it a lot, especially preparing for this conversation. I thought it's essentially somehow Céline Sciamma, she knows exactly the amount of people necessary to create the tension or illustrate the theme. Or is that very conscious to you? Like in Tomboy, it's a very microscopic universe when you kind of describe it. But when I think about the film, it feels very universal, as you say. Like when you write, when you prepare, like when does this element come into your sort of concentrated?
Yeah, it's more and more conscious, because for Water Lilies, for instance, I didn't know that I would be so obsessed with the fact that the frame should only be filled with things you want to look at. So my assistant director, for instance, planned a lot of silhouettes, figuration. I don't know, when the people that are stand-ups. No, not stand-ups. The people, like there's
extras.
A scene, extras.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have to think about the extras, and they ask you, like, for this scene, how many extras do you want? And I was like, I don't think I want extras, but it was my first film. So, they were in charge. They had more experience than I had. So extras were planned, and they were here on the set. And I kept doing, okay, no, and so move, so that it would get out of the frame.
Yeah.
And nobody kind of believed me that I didn't want that many. And now they trust me, and they should, because it costs money. So
it does. You're the new favorite director. I'm going to have only 8 people.
Exactly.
But for the swimmers, you had to have some sort of number, I'm sure. For
of course.
Yeah, choreography of the.
And now I know. I trust myself on this. I know the numbers are right. And it's the same actually with, I'm not compare people to accessory, but it's the same with, and portraits is really, really emblematic of that. Like what you put also in the frame regarding the objects, and I want to pay attention. I want everybody to pay attention to what's in the frame. So you shouldn't put things you're not interested in. And for portrait, for instance, it's a reconstitution. So usually, except for maybe Barry Lyndon, which I think is a very good example, and that's why it's a film, that's kind of the only film that I watched in the preparation of Portrait, because Kubrick's makes you believe in the fact that you don't have to put that many furniture, or to believe actually in the time and the fact that it's a historical time, and that it's a. For instance, on Portrait, there is no furniture. That we built all the furniture, and there is no. There is not the little clock or the candles, or it's only boxes of wood and linen sheets, white, that are put up there. So it's the fact that we chose very carefully everything that is in the frame, because everything is going to play. It's like you decide if it's a chamber orchestra, it's an orchestra, or a quartet, or because everything is going to play.
It became literal when you brought in Vivaldi, but I definitely thought about that while I was sort of pre-analyzing a little bit. And I was thinking, it's the kind of precision that you use when you put together a chamber orchestra or a quartet or a quintet or an octet or whatever. But the music is not supposed to sound like 8 or 6 or 12. It sounds like music either way, and that's fantastic in a way. How expansive music, for example, can be, and cinema should look to music more often. I think in a way, I'm struggling a bit with great cinema that has no music in it. I'm not saying literal music. I'm saying the kind of musical quality of the experience. And I think probably that was one of my favorite parts of a film I loved a lot, Portrait of a Lady of Fire. But suddenly you kind of showed us the musicality of the film. I felt it, but suddenly it stepped into the image. And that choir sequence, I don't know what you call it. I didn't know how to describe it, but it feels both surreal and very concrete. But the sound of the song feels like it has some room. So it's not too realistic. It felt very conscious. Could you I wanted to ask you just specifically about this scene. Like, how did you conceive it on paper? How did you work on the mise en scène of the whole thing?
Well, yes, there's only 2 moments where there's music in Portrait, which is a decision I took very early on the process of writing. Because if you do a film without a score, then you should know early on, because then you have to find the musicality elsewhere.
I missed Para 1, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm sure he'll return in the future.
Well, he did write the song from the choir.
Know. So he's there anyway.
It's there.
My bad.
It's his work. Yeah, there's Vivaldi and there's Parawan. So you have to find the musicality elsewhere, and so it means that in the process of shooting, you will have it definitely influences the rhythm. I wanted to, and you work a lot with the sound editor, because the musicality is going to be about the winds, the sea. The breathing of the actresses, it wasn't. It was a decision I took only on for a matter of reconstitution, because the movie talks also about the relationship of the character with art, and also how love is an education to art, and now also how art consoles us from our loves. And I wanted to put the viewer in the same position as the characters. That is, that they are frustrated with beauty. Finding a book is something you will read it 5 times. Listening to music is pretty rare. You have to go to church, and so I didn't want the viewer to have access to the beauty of a score, and when the characters they don't. So this moment, the bonfire scene, we can say, the choir scene, was a very, very important scene, because it talks also about the power of music in cinema, and the film talks about cinema, obviously, and connects the viewer to the power of music in cinema. And you don't have to be shy, because the fact that there is no music doesn't mean that music, it would be vulgar, or music is too easy. Actually, yes, I wanted the scene to begin in a very realistic way, so not too many women. Like, there are, I think 12 women singing. They actually sung on set, but we also recorded them in studio. And then in the mixing process, I wanted this to be there would be 40 of them. And, it's always a negotiation, because when you set it really realistically, then you have to kind of sometimes to fight your own collaborators to make it like unreal. I like to catch it for real and then feel free to enhance it.
The strange thing about cinema, it's we're always struggling to get to the truth and realities. But the camera is it's merciless. It captures something very real. And then if you want to draw it away from reality, it's twice as hard almost to create some sort of, not abstraction, but the floating sort of musicality, for example, that
exactly
real life doesn't always have.
Yeah. And I tend to be radical at each step, which means I radically wanted the choir to be a real choir, the singers to be real singers, not actors, which also is a risk you take because, they've never been looked at by a camera, and it's really, really, it's something. Yeah. It's scary, and so that it be radically realistic and that we would all live this moment. So, like, for instance, all the women, they were looking, there was this big fire, and all the, actually the extras, they were looking at these women singing, and there was shiver in this forest. And then, in the process of, especially the sound editing and the sound mixing, to not care about the fact that we did it realistically, but to go for the massive effect of the reverbs and to put them in a cathedral, really, and we don't care, But all these radical steps that adds up bring this kind of aesthetic that adds radicality, I think.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. We have half an hour, and it's. I know that it's kind of running out, but to kind of move towards the ending, obviously I find your films very interesting. I'm sure it would be a lot that could be talked about when we dive directly into cinema and language and everything. But to step a little bit back and step into the audience in a way, because you're presenting a special screening in Oslo tonight of Portrait of a Lady of Fire. How has it been for you these last few years, sort of looking at those three films that were young, like the whole feeling of all three films were young, and you were a young filmmaker, you are still a young filmmaker, but you've graduated in a way. I still feel like we should mention My Life as a Ma vie de courgette.
Courgette, yeah.
Courgette.
Yeah.
Its Norwegian title is Løvetannbarn, something completely different. It feels as your film as well. I don't know how much you consider it a part of the oeuvre, but to kind of see this film is also to see the beginning of something, the beginning of a chapter. Where do you sort of consider yourself now with bringing this film out to an audience around the world? You're in Oslo now. Like, do you meet people and find that they know all your films? Do you feel like they are discovering you now? And what's next?
No, I definitely have a feeling that people are really familiar with the body of work, and that's the beauty of touring, and it's that, and also that's the beauty of cinema and doing Q&As, and it's that people they choose to be in the room.
Yeah.
And especially when you're working on the release, that's the luck I have. It's that okay, it's cool to have the international acclaim of festivals. And the festival crowd is a great crowd. But when you are in a city and that people, they buy their tickets, they choose to be in the room.
They get a babysitter somewhere. They come, they show up.
It's because they want to see that film. Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to have people that are very faithful and they're coming. And I feel like it's a conversation we are having. And I really feel privileged. And you mentioned My Life as a Zucchini or My Life as a Courgette.
That's the one, zucchini.
Yeah. And it's not my film, but it was I consider it a very important step for me because it was the first time that I was writing officially for kids. I had the luck that Tomboy was a film that kids saw a lot.
The 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds that watch Tomboy when I'm there at the cinema here in Norway, they love it.
So I was lucky enough to get that attention, but it wasn't crafted for them. It was crafted to include them, praying for kids to see it. But Zucchini is different. And in the process of writing this film, I kind of learned, it helped me take the step to be even more straightforward with the emotions. And Portraits is also a consequence of that, I think. The emotional journey, the fact that I want my film to be like an arrow that you would deep very slowly into somebody's heart so that it would hurt in the end, but also, in a very tender way. That's something that I learned from My Life as a Zucchini, also because it's the film I've participated to that has done the most. I mean, it's done 1 million tickets in France, for instance.
That's amazing.
And it helped me being, I think, more brave with my my first grown-up film.
Well, I think you've been brave, and I thank you for all of these films. It's very inspirational for all of us here who know your films, and I hope more people get to know them. Céline Sciamma, thank you so much for joining our little podcast talk here. And to our readers and listeners, the film Portrait of a Lady of Fire will have its opening day on the Christmas Day in Norway. So it'll be like a Christmas film.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Thank you very much. See you later.
See you.